I can see you now.
Okay, let me.
And Carrie, you're going to go ahead and scroll the memos, the bar agenda pack.
For the
Okay.
50th time.
Sorry, it's just things go wrong downhill very quickly. I just wanted.
I know. I'm just a little rusty, so be patient with me.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I need to open up these things.
That's putting it mildly, Tony. Things go downhill quickly.
I know.
Having sat through some of our council meetings with technical difficulties, we start getting calls, man.
I know technology is great until it doesn't work, so it stops working.
Oh, sorry. I gotta find that one.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Oh,
Shoot.
Oh.
Will be made available at a later time on the NVTA website. I will call upon board members, presenters, staff, and others.
Just to let everybody know, it says live on YouTube. So although we haven't started the meeting yet, we are live.
Okay, everyone. Thank you for the disclosure, Antonio. Very wise of you to share that with this group.
We will try to behave ourselves.
Also, this is Kathy Alexander. I'm going to get the recording started because a lot of people are joining as attendees who I need to promote.
Yeah. Well, let's vote on who we want to promote first. Mayor Sedgley, how are you?
I'm well, thank you for asking.
Good, good. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Alfredo, how are you doing?
You know what? I'm so appreciative of all these camps that can take care of kids during summer.
Excellent.
It would be very tough to try to work from home with kids that like to do Zoom bombs, I've learned. So all these camps are a wonderful thing to parents.
Mommy and daddy are tired.
Yes.
Although it might be worthwhile to recognize that those with young families are entitled to have the kind of fun that goes with having young families.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Besides, it encourages a level of spontaneity that facilitates creativity and flexibility.
And on the spot thinking too.
Exactly.
For those in the Napa City Parks and Recreation Camp?
This one is not, Scott. This one's a guide camp up by Tulake Cemetery, which you're very familiar with, giving tours out there. So yeah, it's a little nice camp from 9 to 3, and they do artwork, and I get to color my office with wonderful artwork they do. So it's a win-win.
I tried to get in that camp and they told me I was too old.
Well, you just don't meet the criteria, you know, the skill set or the talent. You know, I hate to say it, Mayor.
I like the color outside of the lines, as you all know.
Oh yeah, that's well documented.
You are so young at heart, Chris.
Aw, thanks. You're welcome back, Scott, anytime.
And we're live on YouTube, just for anyone that's wondering.
Well, we're recording too, so everybody is able to hear this over and over again.
All right, to spare the public of that joy, are we close to quorum?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, we have a quorum.
Wonderful, Carrie. So, Carrie, thank you for jumping in and assisting us as well.
Well, I'm a little bit rusty, so have some patience.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We'll get through this just fine. So if we have quorum, why don't we're going to start with the tax agency. So you let me know when we can start.
We can start at any time.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chair of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. We're going to start with the tax agency. So we're officially going to call this meeting to order at 1:02. If you could please join Mayor Canning in leading us in the pledge, please.
Grable, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Mayor Canning, for that. Carrie, if you can please do roll call.
Director Garcia,
Here.
Director Joseph,
Here.
Director Kraus, Director Canning,
Here.
Director Alicio,
Present?
Director Sedgley,
Here.
Director Perdoza,
Here.
Director Ramos,
Here.
Director Doreen,
I'm here.
Jeff Ellsworth is absent, Director Dorman,
Here.
and Director Dunbar is absent. And if you will hold on tight, I will do the preamble.
Carrie,
Yes.
just to let you know that Councilmember Anna Chateau is here on behalf of Mayor Ellsworth.
Oh, thank you,
You're welcome.
Anna.
See,
Thank you,
Carrie,
Vice Mayor Doreen.
see, Carrie, you're already correcting me. I forgot to tell you to roll the preamble, so you're on it.
Okay, let me get this going and then we'll get out of here.
So to the public that's tuning in, we're just
Yeah,
rolling a
well,
preamble that talks about,
I'm getting there. Hold on.
no, it's okay. Just want to let the public know what's going on, so.
I just have to find it.
Part of the benefit of doing meetings virtually is some proper disclosure, so just bear with us while we make sure we roll that up.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting.
Can you
will be
hear that?
conducted as a Zoom
We can hear it, but we can't see it, Carrie. I'm not sure if we're,
Computer order N2920, which suspends certain requirements.
perfect, thank you.
This meeting is being broadcast on the NVTA website. This meeting is being recorded and will.
Carrie,
be
can you just turn the volume up a little bit if possible? Thank you.
Website.
Sorry about that.
The chair will call upon board presenters, staff, and other speakers by name. Ask that they speak clearly and
Let me,
names before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating
I don't know what's going on here.
in Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that activities are visible to viewers and may be part of the Zoom recording. Board members and members of the public participating by Zoom who wish to speak should use the raise hand feature or *9 on their phone. Teleconference attendees will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. Phone participants must unmute themselves by pressing *6. It is requested that public speakers state their name and organization, but providing such information. Written public comments received at info@nvta.ca.gov after 5 p.m. yesterday will be entered into the record but not read out loud. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, feel free to do so and should raise their hand. The chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Panelists should note that the chat feature is active. However, please be aware that anything typed in the chat will be subject to public disclosure. The chat feature is not active to attendees. In order to get the full Zoom experience, please make sure your application.
All right, thank you, Carrie, for rolling that. And for the members of the public, there might have been some challenges in seeing the continuous message, but to get all the information that was said, you download the agenda, the meeting ID is on there, and how to participate is also on there as well. So again, there might have been some reception issues there, but let's move on to the adoption of the agenda. If again, this is for the tax agency. Do we have any directors that wish to make any changes to the agenda as presented? Seeing none. And Carrie, do we have any members of the public that wish to comment on the adoption of the agenda?
I don't see any.
All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Garcia.
All right,
Second, Canning.
All right, we have first by Garcia, second by Canning. Roll call vote, please.
Director Garcia,
Yes.
Director Joseph,
Yes.
Director Canning,
Yes.
Director Alicio,
Yes.
Director Sedgley,
Yes.
Director Pedrosa,
Yes.
Director Ramos,
Yes.
Director, and I'm sorry, Anna, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
That's okay. It's like shoe and a toe, shoe toe.
Chuteau, Director Chuteau,
Yes.
Director Doreen,
Yes.
and Director Dorman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, let's move on to public comment. This is a time when anyone can address the tax agency on any item that's not on today's agenda. Carrie, do we have any members of the public that wish to address the tax agency?
I do not see any.
Justin Hall has
Justin
raised his
Hall.
hand. I'm going to allow
Thank
him
you.
to talk.
I cannot see him.
Justin, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm gonna say thank you all our transportation let me going on the bus. I so happy. I so glad now we need this do step 2 to bring more bus for Napa. So hopefully end of July, and then the Milk Creek school not gonna start till September 7. So thank you everybody. So let me come back on the bus. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Justin, for joining us today. Carrie, do we have anyone else in the public?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I don't see any hand raised.
There is
I
not.
Kathy's actually monitoring the public comment
All
tonight, and I can't see it with screen sharing.
No worries. All right, thank you, Kathy, for helping us identify any public that wishes to participate. So we're going to move on to our consent items. We do have one item on consent. This is the minutes for April 21st meeting. Do we have any director comments? I don't see any hand
Yes,
raised.
Mr. Petrosa,
Yes.
I was late coming into the meeting, so if you would make sure that I'm on the roll call.
Wonderful. All right, Member Kraus is on. Gary, thank you for joining us. All right,
Got it.
going,
Thank you.
all right, going back to the consent item, I don't see any directors with their hand raised. Kathy, do we have any members of the public that wish to comment on consent?
We do not.
All right, with that said, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Joseph, so moved.
We have first by Joseph,
Second by Kraus.
second by Kraus. Roll call vote, please.
Director Garcia,
Yes.
Director Joseph,
Yes.
Director Canning,
Yes.
Director Kraus,
Yes.
Director Alicio,
Yes.
Director Sedgley,
Abstain.
Director Pedrosa,
Yes.
Director Ramos,
Yes.
Director Chuteau,
Dane.
Director Doreen,
Yes.
Director Dorman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you, everyone. Let's move on to agenda item 7. This is an action item, City of Napa 5-year project list update. Alberto, I believe you're going to be presenting this. So this is on page 7 through 15.
Actually, Chair, this is Antonio Honorado. I'm going to be preparing, speaking to this item.
All right,
Members
go
of the
ahead.
board, Antonio Honorado, Director of Finance here for the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. For this item, staff is asking the NVTA-TA board to approve the City of Napa's Measure T revised 5-year project list. The city is revisiting its adopted 5-year work plan due to staffing shortages and updated fiscal revenue projections, which has directly affected the streets and sidewalk maintenance programs. This is as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Staff is seeking approval of a modified 5-year project list to align available funding and recalibrate the timing of certain projects for the upcoming fiscal year. Jurisdictions usually update the respective 5-year lists at least once every other year. However, if a jurisdiction's capital improvement program, its CIP, changes before the required update, they are allowed to revise their project list so long as they comply with the Measure T ordinance requirements, which is to hold a public meeting at one of their regularly scheduled meetings and to have their governing board approve the updated list through a resolution. The City of Napa has met these two requirements, and attached to the agenda is a copy of the resolution. At this point, I would like to introduce Rosalba Ramirez, who is the Senior Civil Engineer at the Public Works Department for the City of Napa. Rosalba will provide a more thorough explanation of the modifications and the reasoning behind it. Rosalba, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
And do you see the presentation?
I do.
Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so let me, and I'll just tell you when to click through, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. If you can go to the next slide. And so this is just recapping our 5-year work plan and why it was updated. I did want to focus on, this is the same slide that we had in the other presentations on what we actually utilize the money for. This hasn't changed in our 5-year plan or the update to the 5-year plan. We still use the money for collectors and arterials. If you could go back, there you go. Pavement rehabilitation. Right now the plan kind of just focuses on grind and overlay, but we are looking into all the other options that could utilize the funds the best way, and preventative maintenance, curb, gutter, and sidewalk gap closures. A lot of this ties into the rehabilitation of the roadways, the curb ramps, traffic signals, updating existing traffic signals to modern standards, so not installing new ones. Same with streetlights, updating streetlight layouts to existing streetlights, street drainage, signing and striping, and then intelligent traffic systems, which is tied into the traffic signal updates. Next slide. The changes to the plan. So one of the reasons we updated this plan ahead of schedule was to separate the design and construction phases. So our original 5-year plans lumped in projects, all phases of one project, into one item. So it would be Laurel Street, and that's what it would say, Laurel Street rehabilitation, all in one. So it wouldn't be Laurel Street design, and then a few years later, you see Laurel Street construction, which is realistically what we need in projects. We need that time to effectively design the project, to make sure we're including all the different improvements needed. Roadway improvements, safety improvements, striping improvements, drainage improvements. We need that design time. So in the previous plan, it being showed as just one area and not breaking it up into 2 phases, it would be confusing to the public. They'd call in and say, I see Laurel Street here scheduled for this year. This is the current year. When are you guys coming out to construction? And we'd have to clarify that we're still working on the design, because that is the important component of this project. And then once we get closer to construction, you will get the alerts and the notices letting you know when we're out in your area. So by splitting it up on this new 5-year plan that's available to the public, when they see that, they're aware that, okay, my area is in design in this year. Construction isn't proposed till this later date. So they're more aware of the actual phases and when they can expect to physically see us out there doing the improvements. And it also helps with us with tracking, to be able to update different staff and different management staff and different agencies that this is when we're actually going to be out there constructing. So if other agencies plan to do utility work in the area, they can contact us when they see our project in that area, say in design. They can say, I see you guys are in design in this area. We're actually going to try to coordinate our work while you're in design so we get ahead of your construction. So having it break down into phases really helps us coordinate a lot better with utilities and other agencies as well. Another change to the 5-year plan was breaking up the westward neighborhood improvements. In the previous plans, we had the area as a whole listed as phase 1, phase 1A, phase 2, phase 2B, phase 2A. And that was becoming very confusing as well because it's such a large area. And we've encountered just in the pre-design of it that we aren't going to be able to just to go through and install sidewalks and vertical curb and do the roadway improvements. There's a lot of design elements we have to take into consideration because those streets are narrow. So instead of having the public look at the 5-year plan and say, hey, phase 2A is supposed to include these streets. You guys haven't even come to this area. when's my work being done? It's now we have the interior streets. We can let them know that we're moving through the neighborhood as we identify areas that we can move forward to. So we're trying to approach it to, okay, we have the room and the sufficient information needed to move forward with the design and construction plan for this area. So that would be Westwood neighborhood interior streets, these following streets incorporated into it. And that allows us to get the improvements there and not try to get them all rushed and done at once, and give the proper information to the residents of the area of when we're going to move forward through the streets. So by changing it from just Westwood neighborhood improvements, phase 1A, phase 2B, and just Westwood neighborhood interior streets, it's helping us with the planning and spreading out the plan, design, and construction of that area. We also updated the budget for each year to reflect the anticipated reduction in funds due to impacts from COVID. So instead of trying to max out the 8 to 9 million, we're trying to be a little bit more conservative and realistic with what we're anticipating, so that we can budget out projects accordingly and not try to assume we're going to get $8 to $9 million and try to fit as many projects as we can within that budget, and then come short because we realized we actually did not get those funds back that year. So we did adjust it to try to be a little bit more conservative, to give us a more realistic view on what money we're going to be anticipating each year. Next slide. And so this is what the previous plan map looked like. There's about, I think, 3 different slides that broke down the previous 5-year plan. And this one was the previous year. Berman and Bancroft Courts is part of the Westwood neighborhood area. And that's currently finishing up construction. But you can see through there we have Westwood neighborhood rehabilitation phases. They're just, you don't see that breaking down design. You just see the name of the actual street and project. So this layout, if you look even to 2122, Coombs Street and Coombs, Laurel Street, phase 1, the neighbors and the residents were really thinking, okay, this is the year you're coming out to do construction in my project, in my area. And that was becoming very confusing, and having to let them know we're still working on design. So with our update, if you can go to the next slide. This is what the updated plan looks like. So Sosco Avenue was just added additional money to finish up that project. That one's currently going out to construction, but that one's from a couple years back. But we now have Westwood neighborhood interior streets covering all the streets. And that's an ongoing, that's a different animal of a project. So we are approaching that a little bit differently than the others, but this is allowing us to update the neighbors and the residents to let them know where we're at with that streets. Westwood neighborhood street lighting plans and construction. So that makes it clear. We're planning the street lights layout and going to construction with them. It's a little bit simpler to update the layout of the street lights. That's why that project in particular is plan and construction. Then you go on to Lincoln Avenue design. That's a lot larger street that's going to require us to really get some more information on what type of rehabilitations required for that area, how many curb ramps, what's the sidewalk condition like, be able to properly address the striping to see if we can add any additional safety and pedestrian components to it. So that one clearly states Lincoln Avenue design. So anybody looking at this project can say, okay, I'm not expecting to see Lincoln Avenue construction that year. It's still in design between Lone Oak and Solano. So kind of took that approach to help with the public, and again, to help with our coordination with other agencies and utilities. These projects, all of our Measure T projects and CIP projects, are going to be on a GIS map that we use with agencies, so an interagency GIS map. It's accessible by NSD and our water department, PG&E, different agencies. So when they look at it, they can pull up these streets and see the information that pops up is Lincoln Avenue designed this year, and one of the later years, it's Lincoln Avenue construction. So just having it laid out this way helps us with coordination as well. And then the budget, we did reduce the budget down to, I think we maxed out where we could at 7.5, and then try to spread them out and not try to push it too high up in anticipation that we might not receive all those funds. Can you go on to the next slide, please? And this is again just still a side-by-side comparison. Our next handful of years, 23, 24, 24, 25, future projects, how we had it listed in the previous 5-year plan. you don't see the breakdown between design and construction, and we just wanted to clean it up really. If you can go to the next slide, please. And this is the updated 5-year plan map of that version of that year. Breaking it down, you can clearly see construction design broken down, and then the budget. We tried to maximize what we could, but stay in a conservative idea for what we actually expect to receive. I'm going to the next slide, please. And that was pretty much it. Just wanted to show you guys the side by side of what the updates actually look like compared to our previous 5-year plan, and to let you know why we did those updates. I am here to answer any questions you might have on the plan.
All right, thank you very much, Rosalba, for your presentation. And Antonio, thank you for filling in as well. Let's turn to our City of Napa representatives first. Vice Chair Alessia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rosalba, for presenting this presentation to us. This was also presented to City Council a month or two ago as needed. As you know, we've been impacted, as all of you have, by COVID and our overall revenue. And so it was a combination of that, a combination of the fact that we had 85 positions frozen of 500 of full city staff. We normally have that were frozen, returning an approval of 68. So there's a little bit of a staffing shortage in addition to a funding shortage. And then I think it's just about working smarter and making this a little bit easier, more transparent for our residents to follow what we're doing in terms of these phases and reformatting that. So, and I do believe, Rosalba, this was also presented to the NVTA-TA board a month ago, correct? Before presenting it to us? Correct. Okay. So if you have any other questions, please let us know. But Rosalba, thank you for sharing.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair. I don't see any additional hand raised from directors at this time. Kathy, do we have any members of the public that wish to address us on this item?
Chair, we do not.
All right, I'll bring it back to the board. And if there's no further discussion, Rosalba, thank you very much for your presentation. This is an action item, so I will entertain a motion for approval.
I'll move the item, Sedgley.
All right, we have first by Member Sedgley.
Second, Joseph.
Second by Joseph. Roll call vote, please.
Director Garcia,
Yes.
Director Joseph,
Yes.
Director Canning,
Yes.
Director Kraus,
Yes.
Director Alicio,
Yes.
Director Sedgley,
Yes.
Director Pedroza,
Yes.
Director Ramos,
Yes.
Director Shuto,
Yes.
Director Doreen,
Yes.
Director Dorman,
Yes.
and Director Dunbar is absent, so motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much again to the City of Napa team for your presentation. We're going to move on to future agenda items. Do I hear any future agenda items from directors? Seeing none. With that, we're going to adjourn to our next meeting, which is a special meeting, September 13th, 2021. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
Stay on, Anna. We have another meeting. Okay.
Councilmember Shuto knows the drill.
Okay, let's get this one up.
Carrie, do we have to run the preamble again?
No, we do not, and
Okay.
I will just confirm the roll.
All right. You let me know when we can start.
Trying to get we can start when you are ready.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alfredo Pedroza, Chair of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. We're going to call the meeting to order for Wednesday, July 21st at 1:26 p.m. We can please do roll call.
I can confirm the roll as such as the NVTA-TA meeting that we just finished.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carrie, for that. All right, let's move on to the adoption of the agenda. Do we have any directors that wish to make any changes to the agenda as presented? I don't see any. Kathy, do we have any members of the public that wish to comment on the adoption of the agenda?
We do not, Chair.
All right, with that, seeing no comment, I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Approve, Garcia.
Alessio seconds.
All right, we have first by Garcia, second by Alessio. Roll call vote, please.
Director Garcia,
Yes.
Director Joseph,
Yes.
Director Canning,
Yes.
Director Kraus,
Yes.
Director Alicio,
Yes.
Director Sedgley,
Yes.
Director Pedroza,
Yes.
Director Ramos,
Yes.
Director Doreen,
Yes.
Director Chateau,
Yes.
and Director Dorman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, let's move on to public comment. This is the time when anyone can address NVT on any item that's not on today's agenda. Kathy, do we have any members of the public that wish to address the board?
We do not, Chair.
All right, seeing no public comment, we're going to move on to item 5, Chairperson's report, MTC report, ABAG report. I'll turn first to our ABAG representatives. Do we have a report out? All right, I'm not seeing any report out from ABAG at this time.
Leon Garcia has his hand raised. Chair.
Okay, good. I can't see
Yes,
that.
no report on ABAG. There's a couple of traffic incidents that happened on Highway 37 recently that impact the commute hour. A gasoline truck turned over on segment B. That's before you get to Infineon Space Raceway. So all traffic was routed through American Canyon going west toward Novato, along with the usual customary amount of traffic we get through on a daily basis. It was a commuter nightmare. And then about a week ago, another car caught fire on that same segment, shutting that down. So it just speaks to the importance of being able to address the improvements needed on Route 37. It's a huge congestion problem when this is not working. But on a day-to-day basis, it's about 50,000 cars a day come through American Canyon and 49,000 leave Vallejo for Novato in the morning. So that put about 100,000 cars a day through our roadway system, trying to get from east to west. And of course, in the afternoon, it's same number coming back with different routes. Just thought I would share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. All right, I see no other hands raised here. We're going to move on to MTC report. Very busy July, even though the month's not over. So I'll just run through a couple items quickly. There is an opening on the Policy Advisory Committee. One of our representative, Terry Scott, is part of it, and he would be a great source for anyone that's interested. There's, again, some current positions opened. They've been open since June 14th, and it closes Saturday, August 1st. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to our Executive Director, Kate, or myself. Again, we're looking for public participation, especially from the region's equity priority communities. A little bit more specific to Napa County, we were successful. The commission did approve NVTA's letter of no prejudice for $20 million for the Napa bus maintenance facility. This was an important allocation from the RM3, if we all remember those days. We're hopeful that the litigation is favorable, but this is a first step of, again, letter of no prejudice for $20 million. In terms of the American Rescue Plan Act, the Program and Allocation Committee did approve the first tranche, and we were very strategic in terms of allowing one tranche to go forward, holding on to another to see how things stabilize. If this is approved at the commission meeting later this month, which I'm hopefully will, NVTA stands to receive around $2.3 million from the Rescue Plan Act. So this is significant news for our region, especially for us locally, in terms of being able to increase ridership and regain some financial stability. In terms of the Blue Ribbon Committee, as many of you know, this has been an ongoing effort led by Solano County Supervisor in terms of looking at how do we rebuild transit for recovering from the pandemic. And it's an incredible opportunity. We're going to come out of this with some action steps. What I'll tell you, being in Napa County is different. We have one operator. Many counties have different operators, and sometimes the collaboration and information sharing between operators doesn't really benefit the rider. So we're really looking at how do we streamline some of those opportunities in counties where there's multiple operators. Again, Napa County is a little bit different in that sense. But very productive month at MTC, and we continue to talk about network management kind of as a bigger picture discussion around the Bay Area, again, of looking at the whole transportation system, the multiple operators, and again, with the goal of how do we make this easier for the user, especially as we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and public transit is going to be part of the solution. At this point, I'll see if there's any questions on the report from ABAG or the report from MTC. I see no questions from my colleagues at this time, and I don't see any hands raised. So let's move on to item 6. This is the director's update. Kate, take it away.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Kate Miller, Executive Director. So on Sunday, NVTA and TransDev staff attended the event celebrating the lives of the 9 Valley Transportation Authority transit workers who tragically lost their lives during the mass shooting event at VTA on May 26th. Our Vine bus was part of a long procession of VTA and transit operator buses from around the Bay Area, Sacramento, Monterey, and Santa Cruz counties. You all were alerted to the fact that the Kaseya ransomware on July 2nd, which was the eve of the Independence Day holiday weekend, TransDev, like many other companies around the world, downloaded an update, and it ended up resulting in NVTA's it ended up being that the Vine phones dispatch and ADA scheduling software was down for 24 hours. Staff immediately sent out rider alerts, announcements on social media and on 511, and redirected riders to call the ticket office at the Saucil Gateway Transit Center to arrange rides. TransDev was able to restore services the next day, prioritizing NVTA because so much of our service is on demand and relies on the phone system for rider services. So we're grateful for TransDev prioritizing us for that. Exciting news, the IMOLA Park and Ride invitation for bid was released on July 16th. It is on our website. Bids are due on August 4th, and we hope to request the board's approval to award the contract at the special meeting in August. Vine maintenance facility and transit services are a big thing on today's agenda, and so I just wanted to point out that the board has just these significant items. First, there's an item requesting the board's authorizing staff to negotiate and execute agreements relating to the financing of the Vine Transit Maintenance Facility. And once the board takes action, NVTA will release the invitation to bid for the facility. Bank of Marin and the Build America Bureau agreements are also requesting your authorization for us to proceed with that. Also on the agenda for the board's consideration is a 5-year contract award with 2 one-year options to TransDev, the Vine current contractor, in an amount of $81.4 million. And then finally, it is with mixed emotion that I let the board know that Kelly Hirschberg will be retiring in August. Kelly has had a long and distinguished career at Caltrans. She has been essential at moving a number of projects in Napa County forward, including Jameson Canyon widening, Saucil Junction, and hundreds of shop projects. Most recently, she has been the Caltrans project manager on the State Route 37 project, coordinating with all 4 North Bay counties at MTC. Kelly has been a good friend to NVTA, and we will miss her greatly. Personally, I will miss Kelly's affable personality, her tenacity, even when problems seem insurmountable, her creative approach to her work, and her commitment to the communities she serves. Kelly, on behalf of who she's participating today, on behalf of NVTA staff and the board, we wish you a long and happy retirement. And I think Kelly wants to say a few words.
All right, thank you, Kate. Kelly, do you wish to say a couple of words now, or do you want to wait for your Caltrans update?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Sure. What better way for me to do what I've been doing for the last about 14 years? So why don't I go ahead and provide you an update of the Caltrans status, and what we could do is, if you allow me, maybe I could say a couple of the words, kind of the mark. All right. So I'm not sure, Carrie, do you want me to share the screen for the Caltrans monthly report? Or would you like to do that?
Yeah, let me get that for you.
Thank you so much.
There we go. Can you see it?
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. So within the project initiation, or what we consider as a planning level, there are actually 7 projects that are listed. Out of 7, actually 2 we were able to complete in the month of June. This is the CAPM project, or payment rehabilitation in American Canyon. The second one, 4AC80, as well as the fourth project on the list, safety project for upgrading the signage in the various routes in the county of Napa. So with that, June is the end of one fiscal year, and July is a new fiscal year for Caltrans. So there's about, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 new projects we're currently working on that will be added. So as a part of the next month, it will be included as a part of the Caltrans report. Now, moving down in the environmental phase, there's about 14 projects we're currently working on. And the one that I just want to point out to you that you may want to keep your eye for the next year is that we have a bridge replacement along 128. This is Rutherford, just to the east of the junction. So maybe, Carrie, if you could scroll down to the next sheet. It's called 4J830, so in page 3. Thank you. So Hopper Slough Bridge, we're currently working on to replace the bridge. So expected draft environmental document is January next year. So with that, there will be a public meeting that will be conducted. So now move down to the design phase. We have over 11 projects we're currently working on. There are 2 that I'd like to point it out, which is the first project, which is a curb ramp for ADA upgrades. That is in the city of American Canyon in some location in Napa. We are looking to ready to list the project, so we'll go up to construction probably spring next year, as well as the 4J300, the CAPM project between St. Helena to the Calistoga along State Route 29. So this CAPM project, due to the temperature constraint for the rubberized asphalt and others, we expect to go out to construction in the summer of next year. So move down, if you could actually continue on with the page 4. So, or I guess 4 or 5. So for the construction phase, we're wrapping on State Route 128 Capel Bridge. This is the one that we had that use a steel module bridge, and I believe I'll provide updates to you. And we just initiated or start working on 121 Huchika Creek, which is near along the Duhigg Road. So that will be ongoing for next 2 summer. And along with that, we'll be wrapping up 121 Capel bridge projects. So we do have a array of projects that we're working on. And I just wanted to also thank you for giving me an opportunity to serve the Napa County and the community. So I was just looking back at my career. So I've been working for Caltrans about 30 years. About half of it was actually working for, as my current position as a regional PM for Napa. So I do hope that you're happy with the information that we transmit to you. We did want it to be as transparent as we possibly can. I'll truly miss Kate and NVTA, but there's I consider it as a continual friendship, probably moving forward. And I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity for me to do my current job. And I'll just pause it right there and take any questions you have so I could relate to the next person. And lastly, I know that last few board meetings, I brought in a lot of the senior PM. So we have Daniel Chang, Byron Lin, Gessie Nelaku. I think Amani might not have been here, but she was also very instrumental working on the Imola Park and Ride project. So we do have a senior PMs, and then they're also looking into backfilling my position. So continuing Caltrans support for transportation need in Napa County.
Well, Kelly, thank you very much for your dedicated service. We're going to miss you. But that's quite a career that you've had with Caltrans and also your service in Napa County and our residents. We've definitely benefited from you, but we wish you the best and you deserve what's coming next for you. So just on behalf of the board, thank you for your service. And then at this time, I'll open it up to any other directors that may have anything to say or if they have any questions regarding the presentation from Caltrans update. All right, Mayor Garcia.
Just want to thank Kelly for all your service for NVTA and all the best in your retirement. You had an outstanding career. Thank you very much.
Mayor Garcia. Mayor Canning.
Yes, Kelly, thank you very much. We've had a couple pretty big projects, one with the replacement of Lincoln Avenue Bridge, which is our main street. And you were always there to help us move some things along and to help us with our endeavors. And I certainly appreciated your style and your advocacy for us, and enjoy your next endeavor. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor Canning. Councilmember Dorman.
Kelly, I'm Carrie Dorman from Yountville. We haven't really had a big chance to work together, but I know you have been working behind the scenes. You have made me, you've helped me learn a lot about construction and how projects work. I appreciate that. And I totally echo Kate on your excellent good humor, even in times of high stress. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you, council member. All right, I see no other hand raised. Again, Kelly, thank you very much for your service and we wish you the best. All right, Kate, and also again, thank you for your update. I didn't see any questions regarding Kate's update, and just keep us apprised of who's going to be representing Caltrans in these meetings going forward. So at this time, we're going to move on to our consent items. We have a few items on consent. Do we have any director comments on consent? I don't see any. Kathy, do we have any members of the public that want to provide any comments on our consent calendar?
We do not, Chair.
All right,
Sorry, I have an update. As you all received in your handout packets, item 8.2, the quitclaim deed for the Housley easement. It's noted that on page 2 of the amendment easement, paragraph 2 is actually should read grantor hereby grants and conveys to grantee. Okay. And then also in the public notice on page 45 of your packet, the NVTA meeting stated in the public notice, it stated July 14th, I believe, and it should have been July 21st, which was actually the date that was published in the register and today's board date. So those were the changes on consent item 8.2.
All right, we'll approve the consent, or the consent calendar will reflect those changes as just shared by Karen. All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to approve our consent calendar as presented with the changes.
I'll move.
Kraus.
All right, well, I'll give the first by Vice Chair Leslie, a second by Kraus. Roll call vote, please.
Director Garcia.
Yes.
Director Joseph.
Yes.
Director Canning.
Yes.
Director Kraus.
Yes.
Director Alicio. Liz.
I said yes.
Thank you. Sorry, you're on mute. Director Essentially.
Yes.
Director Pedroza.
Yes.
Director Ramos.
Yes.
Director Doreen.
Yes.
Director Chateau.
I'm abstained since I wasn't there for the minutes for the first one.
So you just want to abstain on the minutes then?
Yes, please. Yes, for the others.
And Director Dorman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our regular items 9.1. This is the Transportation Development Act, Article 3, TDA 3 countywide claim and 3-year program of projects. Deanna is going to cover this, so I'll turn it over to staff. This is found on page 55 to 63.
Good afternoon, Chair Pedroza. This is item 9.1. I'm Diana Meehan, the senior planner here with NVTA. This is the Transportation Development Act, also known as TDA 3 countywide claim and 3-year program of projects. This is an action requesting, it's 2-part action. The first will be to approve the resolution requesting that we allocate $209,745,000 to the first year in this cycle of projects. This has to be done annually. This resolution allows us to do that. The second part is to adopt the 3-year program of projects. The TDA3 program is for bicycle and pedestrian projects. It's funded by approximately 2% of a quarter-cent sales tax, state sales tax. It generates for Napa County approximately $150,000 per year. All jurisdictions are eligible to apply for these funds. The board has requested in the past that we give priority to capital projects, which we do annually, although this funding is permissible for other types of planning and projects like that. Any unallocated funds do roll over. We don't lose those funds if we don't use the funds. That's a good thing. Projects that are funded must complete within 2 years of the fiscal year that they're allocated from that year and 2 years plus. In March 17th of this year, we issued a call for projects. The project's applications were due on the 23rd of May. We received 4 applications from 3 jurisdictions, totaling a little over $1 million for approximately $500,000 of available funding. One of the project's requests can be fully funded. The other projects will receive partial funding, and you can see how that is laid out in attachment 2 of your item. For fiscal year 21-22, the estimate is the amount that we are programming, $209,745. The estimates in the outer years are exactly that. It's an estimate of $150,000 annually. We do come back on an annual basis as we program that year's allocation to true up the amount. Also, in addition, there's $53,000 that was programmed in fiscal year 2018-19 to a project in the city of American Canyon. That project did not move forward, but is now ready to move forward. There were issues under COVID and also with some staff changes. We are recommending that funding be returned to that project with some additional funds. On May 24th, the ATAC reviewed the program of projects and agreed that to the staff recommendations. Also on July 1st, the Technical Advisory Committee met and agreed to the program allocations. After all these project submittals were reviewed, the countywide claim comes before you guys, and we submit it to MTC for approval. You can choose, the only alternative would be to not program these projects, and the funds would remain until we can open up an additional call for projects. And just as a reminder, what we're asking the board for is to approve resolution 21-19, requesting that fiscal year 21-22 TDA3 funds for the allocation of pedestrian and bicycle projects in the amount of $209,745 as part of the countywide claim, and also to adopt the fiscal year 2021-22 through fiscal year 23-24 3-year program of projects. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this item.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation. Do we have any questions at this point? Let me see if there's any. I don't see any initial hands raised being held up by directors. Kathy, do we have any members of the public that wish to comment on this item?
We do not, Chair.
All right, with that, I'll bring it back to the board and see if there's any additional questions.
If not, I'll move to approve. Yeah.
All right, we have first by Member Garcia.
I'll second. Joseph.
Second by Member Joseph. Roll call vote, please.
Director Garcia,
Yes.
Director Joseph,
Yes.
Director Canning,
Yes.
Director Kraus,
Yes.
Director Alicio,
Yes.
Director Sedgley,
Yes.
Director Pedroza,
Yes.
Director Ramos,
Yes.
Director Doring,
Yes.
Director Chateau,
Yes.
and Director Dorman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. And Deanna, thank you very much for your presentation as well. Let's move on to our next item, 9.2. This is the financing approval for the Vine Bus Maintenance Facility Project. I believe this is Antonia presenting. This is on page 64 through 370. I don't know if that's a typo, but that might be how voluminous this agenda item is. Antonio, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody again. And it's not a typo. It's the mother of all memos, at least to date, as far as I know. So for this item, 9.2, staff is asking you, the board, to formally affirm and memorialize several tasks related to the Vine Bus Maintenance Facility Project. After months of negotiations between NVTA, the Bank of Marin, and the Build America Bureau with assistance from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the County of Napa, we are nearing the pinnacle for this project. Today's actions are the culmination of a decade-long process that started back in 2012. For today's action, staff is recommending that you approve resolution 2120 of the following action items to provide financing for the construction of the Vine Bus Maintenance Facility Project, more specifically to authorize the executive director to negotiate, finalize, execute, and deliver a TIFIA loan agreement in an amount not to exceed $19,917,401, or 49% of the total eligible project costs, whichever is greater, and that's in attachment number 3, and to authorize the executive director to negotiate, execute, and deliver a collateral account and service agreement, a CASA, with U.S. Bank, which is located in attachment number 4, and to adopt NVTA's debt management policy, which is attachment number 5, and also to authorize the executive director to negotiate, finalize, execute, and deliver a loan agreement with the Bank of Marin in an amount not to exceed $5 million, which is attachment 6A and 6B, and to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver an irrevocable direction regarding deposits of local transportation funds, LTF, between NVTA and the County of Napa with MTC concurrence in support of the financing arrangement. That is in attachment number 8. And then lastly, to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver an irrevocable direction regarding deposit of fare box revenues between NVTA and the county in support of the financing arrangement, which is in attachment number 9. There is also a couple other attachments in the packet not mentioned above, but they are for informational purposes to give a little bit more clear context of the actions before you today. So this slide shows the board's actions to date since the new maintenance facility was conceptualized as early as 2012. I just wanted to note the last 2 action items, which was a submittal of the Regional Measure 3 letter of no prejudice that Chairman Pedroza mentioned in his report that was approved by MTC back on June 23rd. And of course, the board approved the conceptual financing package back in February, which directed staff to continue negotiations with the Build America Bureau to develop a loan agreement and other required documents. Let's see. So before we discuss the finer points of the financing package, I wanted to go off topic for just a moment. Back in February, at the February board meeting, Director Joseph asked for a comparison of the cost savings expected to be achieved by moving into a new facility. This chart, which is also in the memo, summarizes the potential cost savings and benefits over a 35-year horizon, which is the life cycle of the federal loan. The facility itself is designed for at least a 40 or 50-year lifespan, but because a TIFIA loan is over a 35-year time horizon, the Build America Bureau asked for some life cycle costs. So I pretty much use that information, glean that information for this analysis and try to overlay it upon this one, which has a few other extra factors involved with it. The analysis shows that the new maintenance facility could achieve a cost savings of $77 million over a 35-year period. If we look at it on a line item basis, for utilities, we show that utilities do actually increase, and that's because we are going from a 2-acre site at our current transit yard to a 10-acre facility. So utilities such as electricity, recycled and potable water, sewer, natural gas, and refuse, those are all, have to account for just being at a larger location. Although there will be a net savings and efficiencies achieved, utilities will now need to support the operations for up to 10 acres. So utility costs will increase if you see it through the lens of coverage over the 35-year period. However, on a proportional level, utility costs will be lower overall if compared to a similar sized transit yard. The transit admin services line, that is for such things as landscaping, internet, network operations, routine inspections, and other services needed to operate this facility. So again, proportionally, it's more efficient, but coverage is for a larger area. And so there is a higher cost when you look at it just on a numbers basis. From this point on, this is where we kind of realize huge amounts of savings and benefits. For preventive maintenance, the new maintenance facility should be maintenance free for at least the first 10 years, although there'll be some routine maintenance upgrades to keep the site in a state of good repair. Also, as we convert to a zero emission fleet, there is a saving for using buses with fewer parts and as such, fewer instances of breakdowns or defects. Fuel for buses is expected to decrease substantially. However, we do need to keep in mind that transitioning to a zero emission fleet will be a decade-long process. So we'll continue to use fossil fuels, but those purchases will decrease over time as the fleet converts to zero emissions. As those gasoline and electric buses are retired from service, some of them may be used as part of our contingency fleet or as a backup if the power network, the power grid goes down. And we'll also probably use some utility vehicles and some regular vehicles that use gasoline. So going zero emission doesn't necessarily equate to going fossil fuel free, nor will it happen in a single day. We don't just flip the switch. So there is a cost for fuel, but as you can see, over the 35-year period, if we remain at the Jackson Street yard, we can't accommodate a zero emission fleet, so we'll have to continue using diesel buses, which all public transit agencies have to go zero emissions by 2040. So that is a conflict that we can't, at this point, it's not a problem at this point, but there is a conflict there if we do remain at the current facility. But also too, at the Jackson Street yard, we're at a saturation point in terms of how many buses we can store at any time. For every future vehicle we purchase, we need to dispose of an equivalent vehicle to make room to store new buses. Now, this is at the current facility on Jackson Street. Because of this, the agency will not be able to expand and modernize its fleet as the demand for public transit becomes greater than the supply. For the next two items, I was trying to calculate the economic and social benefits of moving to a new facility. What I call out as GHG reductions is based on the mobile emission reductions for the region by going green. For the health and economic benefits, I was trying to land on a quantitative cost of having a smaller carbon footprint by moving into the facility, as well as having an economic growth multiplier for the potential of having more economic activity in the area, as well as transit contributing to the economy. There is literally only a few studies out there that shows the benefits, the economic and social benefits of moving into a new facility. So I had to support a zero emission fleet. So back in February, I read a couple of analyses that were out there. One was for a school bus operator that had a yard in the Great Lakes region that converted to all electric, as well as I also found a study for a large transit operator in the New York City region, which had a new bus facility that covered 2 city blocks capable of storing 400 buses. So getting an apples to apples comparison was challenging given the unique characteristics of each of those properties and what benefits they derived for moving into a new maintenance yard capable of zero emission fleets. So I attempted to use some very conservative estimates that I gleaned from those two studies to come up with a benefit for this facility. At the new facility, we should see the benefit for transitioning to a zero emission fleet, as well as the health and economic benefits of going electric, creating jobs and spurring economic activity in the area. And so as you can see, instead of a cost, the GHG reductions and the health and economic benefits are synergistic and can provide at least twice the benefits at a new facility. The takeaway of this slide is that NVTA can realize up to $77 million by moving into a new facility, as well as have an asset that will support transit services for the next 50 years, 50 plus years. So now getting back to reality. As I mentioned,
can I butt in for a second? Because I'd like to ask a couple of questions about just the analysis.
Councilmember Joseph, let's finish the presentation if that's okay, and then we'll come back to questions.
Okay.
Absolutely, we'll have time for questions.
Yeah.
So now getting back to reality. So as I mentioned, your action today will formally memorialize prior actions supported by this board and approved in previous meetings. Currently, the budget still stands at $35,747,000 for the construction portion of the budget, and a total project cost at $40,650,000. That hasn't changed since the February's meeting. Those numbers are still reasonable. The table that is summarized in front of you and in your memo, and there is also an attachment number 7, that actually provides a more thorough review of the funding sources. And there are 12 different funding sources to date. So, and the intended uses of those funds. So, I mean, we had to cobble together 12 different funding sources to make this work. This table also provides an idea of the interest expense if both loans were fully drawn down and amortized. Staff intends on using the grants first, then drawing down on the TIFIA loan, then if needed, using the Bank of Marin loan. For the TIFIA loan, NVTA will lock in a fixed interest rate at a 35-year term based on a 50% of the current US Treasury rate on the closing date. The closing date is still a few months away, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But this table assumes an interest rate of 1.4% if we were to close today, or if we were to close with that interest rate. Whereas today's rate is actually closer to 0.9%. So there is a buffer, and our hope is that the interest rate will stay low until the closing date, but they have ticked up slightly since February. So that's an uncertainty, and that's a risk factor that we have to assume. Additionally, we are trying to use the Bank of Marin. We're trying to delay the use of the Bank of Marin loan for as long as possible, with the hopes that Regional Measure 3 funds will start flowing, negating the need to use a private bank loan altogether. We are also aware that the construction material costs and labor shortages the nation is currently experiencing could mean the construction costs may increase from our initial estimates. NVTA has incorporated a $2.5 million contingency in the budget. Although the contingency was intended to address any unforeseen expenses during construction, it is an allowance we've provided ourselves and could be used if construction costs are higher than our initial estimates. So, I've heard stories for projects coming in under budget, some at budget, and some over budget. So I'm trying not to speculate on the outcome of the bids. We simply won't know what the actual bid amount is until we receive the bids for the construction portion, which are due, which will be released today. The IFB will be released today, and bids are due on September the 8th. If there is a gap between our engineer's estimate and the actual bids, then staff will need to reassess the situation and see how we can accommodate that funding gap. The TIFIA, they're willing to provide up to an additional 49% in borrowing, but that also means our borrowing costs will increase, as well as our debt service. And we also have to identify a new fund source for the difference between the TIFIA loan as well as the total amount of the budget. This graph, you've seen it before back in the February meeting, but this shows that LTF revenues, which we will use as debt service, is more than enough to cover the debt service if both loans were fully drawn down. And I say fully, that's including the $19 million TIFIA loan as well as the $5 million Bank of Marin loan. In fact, the coverage is 10 times the amount of LTF revenues received, and that doesn't take into account the other transit revenues such as state transit assistance or other non-federal funds that we can use to service the debt if we needed to. The takeaway is that NVTA has more than enough LTF revenues to satisfy the debt service, and this does not over leverage the agency, nor should servicing the debt disrupt transit operations if there is another contraction in the economy. From the staff's point of view, the risk of default is extremely low. This is the proposed project schedule of future activities that are incumbent upon NVTA. So if the board approves today's actions, we will actually release the invitation for bid this afternoon. And the bids are due in about 3 weeks, September 8th, which we know is an aggressive schedule, but we think it will work itself out. In September or October, at September's or October's board meeting, we'll ask this board to authorize the executive director to execute a transit services contract with a successful bidder. All the while, we hope to also, concurrently, we all hope to also have the TIFIA loan close either in September or October. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in an upcoming slide on that project schedule. Given a start date in September or October, construction should be substantially completed about 380 days later, or January 2023, barring any extreme weather events. If we have a wet winter, actual construction may not occur until the spring. If we have a dry winter, construction may start as soon as everybody's ready to do so, perhaps at the start of the winter season in November or December, in an optimal case. And then once all is said and done, we hope to have occupancy and the facility to be in service in February or in the spring of 2023. So this is NVTA's tentative project schedule. On the other side of that coin, we have BAB must perform certain actions as well. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, you can see that the NVTA will actually, the actions today is not the end of this process. It's actually the beginning of another process. Although the board's actions commit us to seeing this whole loan process through to fruition. It also solidifies NVTA's pledge to see this loan, to see the successful close of this loan. And then it's incumbent upon the feds to perform and take the necessary actions to obligate and set the structure for funding. NVTA will submit a formal loan application. We have the loan agreement for your action today, but there's actually another document, a loan application, that will go to the Bureau's credit review team. If there are no issues, the Credit Bureau will formally invite NVTA to submit an application for a TIFIA loan. The Bureau begins the review process and makes findings that the application is complete. Then the credit review team will formally invite NVTA to submit an application. There's a lot of formalities with the federal government. The Secretary of the Department of Transportation will approve the application, and then notify the Office of Budget and Management, the OMB, to obligate TIFIA fund, the TIFIA loan agreement. Within 2 weeks prior to close, NVTA will provide a final credit rating letter from Moody's, who drafted the preliminary letter when we began this process late last year. So optimistically, if all conditions are satisfied, the loan process is expected to close by mid-September. If missed, the loan will close in mid-October due to the federal fiscal year closing on September 30th, 2021. And the feds usually close their books 2 weeks prior to the start of the fiscal year, and it remains closed until 2 weeks after. So there's like a 30-day window when there is no financial activity occurring at the federal level. We are going to be in the queue to get our review, but realistically, it may not close until after the federal fiscal year opens up in October. The feds are, they're dealing with COVID, they're dealing with economic recovery. They have a lot of challenges and a lot of issues they need to address. And although we're in the queue, we have to wait for our turn for our approvals to move this forward. The risk of that is that interest rates may creep up. And so that could increase our borrowing costs because we don't get the interest rate lock until the day of closing. And so that's, as I mentioned previously, that's still 2 to 3 months away at the earliest. So before I end my presentation and open up to questions, I would like to acknowledge all the hard work of NVTA staff, Roxana Morati, who had an on-site training session of how to deal with federal agencies, our financial advisors at KNN, Barney Allison, who's on the call today with Nasamin, our special legal counsel, and also Deanne Gillick and Paul Chrisman, the agency's legal counsel, who also had a supporting role into ensuring that the documents were reviewed on a local level and our interest and NVTA's interests were protected. And also to the Build America Bureau, they've been very collaborative and they're great to work with. And so they want to see this project come to fruition and want to help NVTA construct this project. So with that being said, that concludes my exhaustive report, and I can open it up to questions or any comments that you may have.
All right, thank you, Antonio, for a very thoughtful and well done report. Let's start with Councilmember Joseph. I know he had some initial questions about assumptions. Councilmember Joseph.
Great, thank you. So you're back to the 35-year. That was where I had my questions. If we zero in on the fuel savings, because that's a fairly substantial amount, more or less covers the cost of the project with financing. So the first question is, a lot of that is because we're switching to electric, and I know the site is big enough that we can include solar panels. So is that those fuel savings, is that also associated with the fact that we have a larger facility that has that solar with battery backup capacity?
Well, the short answer is yes. So it does take into account that we will have solar canopies at the facility, which will assist in fueling up with electricity for the zero emission buses as we convert to an all electric fleet as much as possible. So yes, that takes into account.
So just if I may, I'd like to clarify that. The fuel savings for the solar panels at the facility will fuel the facility itself. Right. We hope to be able to expand on that over the years but we right now don't have the capacity to store batteries. So until we can do that, we're not going to be able to fuel very many vehicles at the facility, but there is capacity. Well, we're going to be fueling, but not through the solar panels, if that is clear.
Okay, but at least the potential is there. It's not like the existing site that's too small to put in that much capacity. So that's a good thing. The second one is, when we save that fuel, is that our savings or is that TransDev's savings?
It is NVTA savings because we purchase the fuel directly from the fuel providers at retail, I will say. So
that's what I was hoping. And then the last piece to the puzzle is, can we apply those fuel savings if, is it in a funding source that could be used to pay down the debt?
Yes, because we mostly use FTA 5307 funds for operations and TDA for operations, and TDA is significantly more than FTA, so we could do that. We can also use it to expand services because, as you can see, the debt payment on the loan is pretty nominal in relationship to the amount of revenues that we actually have. So that's a decision that the board will have to make at some point.
I agree. I mean, my point in all of this is to say we are actually generating a revenue stream that, if push came to shove, could be applied towards the debt service and theoretically not have any noticeable impact on service levels, even though it is a nominal annual debt. So long story short, I appreciate the analysis because it gives me a comfort level that says, you know, we're doing what we need to do to invest in the new maintenance facility, but we are accruing some savings that offset the cost. As for the rest of the financing mechanism, long and drawn out, but pretty standard and typical, and I relished reviewing it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Joseph. Councilmember Dorman.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Honorado, it was a really good staff report and presentation, so thank you so much for that. I'm kind of going to go through the pieces of the staff report. The first one is there's a statement about we're experiencing a strong ridership recovery. And I mean, I have not seen that in the reports we've had. Do you have confidence that that is going to happen from reports you guys have maybe seen?
Well,
so that,
Director Dorman, let me just respond to that.
Okay.
We have actually in the city of Napa seen a significant recovery, which is why we're restoring service. We had, as you know, when the pandemic first happened, we put everything on demand, stop to stop on demand in the city. In order to accommodate the existing wait times and the demand, we've put in 2 fixed route services, and we are going to be adding 2 more to accommodate that demand. We've also restored much of our hours on the shuttles, and we've restored our hours on regional service, and we're about ready to put the 11X back in service as well. We're not doing that because we have the revenues to do it per se. We are doing it because there is actually ridership demand out there that is using the service.
yes, and I went back and I looked at the reports from February and June, and I just want to make sure, because I understand things are coming back from the pandemic, we're adding hours, we're adding service, etc. I'm really happy about that. But prior to that, and taking out the pandemic year, as I recall, we still were concerned about our ridership. So I think my real hidden question is, if we go ahead with this as planned, is it a nimble enough project? If ridership doesn't expand like we think it will, are there places we could house ride shares, or, you know, are there other things? Can we use all of this network together transportation? Can we use our physical plant for that?
Well, look, there's a lot of things that we're doing in terms of changing up how we deploy transit, and part of that could involve, you know, using Uber and Lyft. We are also, as you know, starting to ramp up our transportation development, our demand management program. So that would be the app that we have for ride sharing and things like that. The facility is specifically designed for maintaining our vehicles, and we anticipate that service will be back. I think even if you look at some projections that experts have made on transit, that it may take a couple years for us to come all the way back, but you know, our services are very focused on local service. So that in particular, and also transit dependent riders. So I anticipate that we will be back in full long before some of the other systems that focus largely on commuter service. So I'm confident that we will experience a pretty consistent with what we had before. It also, you know, everybody's out there right now trying to speculate on what's going to happen in the post-pandemic world. Are people going to go back to work? But I would just say that that's less than 10% of our total ridership, and I feel pretty confident that building this facility is something that we need to do to accommodate both the existing service as well as future growth. And I would just
Okay.
add that we
Thank you.
have no choice because we're getting electric vehicles and we have nowhere to charge them. So we have to, accommodate that, and and just remind you that the electric vehicle transition is something that's mandated by the state.
Right. Thank you. So I just want to understand the source of the funds. We have the 4.9 we've already spent. We're getting 19 or 20 from TIFIA. We're getting 5 from Bank of Marin. And so that leaves 15 that we are getting or have gotten from various grants. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's about another $5 million from other federal sources, specifically our 5307 funds for capital, as well as some special grants that we already have secured. There is still about $5 million from local transportation funds. So kind of using, if we have to, we'll draw upon those reserves. And right now the reserves are around the $13 million mark, and it doesn't go down, at $5 million, we start to get very uncomfortable if our reserves dipped around between $5 and $8 million. So there's sufficient reserves there. And there are also other state grants, the local partnership program, LPP, from the state, as well as some smaller local grants that we already have secured as well. So that's where the remaining amounts are in the grant. If you look at attachment, I believe it might be number 7, it shows you all the columns of all the different sources of fund, the 12 different sources of funds that make up the project costs.
Right. And so I'm just trying to figure out, we've either secured them or if we somehow don't secure them, we have reserves to cover.
They are all secured except for the TIFIA loan and the Bank of Marin loan based upon.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. That's exactly it. Thank you. The debt management policy, I know I read it's required that we have one by state law. So does it apply only to the LTF and the farebox funds revenues?
It applies to any debt we take on. So right now it applies specifically to the Bank of Marin loan and the TIFIA loan. But if we took on any additional debt, the debt management policy would apply to those as well.
So those are the 2 pots of funds that we're willing to, I'm going to use the old-fashioned word, I guess, pledge for debt repayment.
And farebox.
Farebox. Mm-hmm.
Right, those 2, LTF and farebox.
That's correct.
And those are irrevocable collateral for the 2 loans we're looking at, TIFIA and Bank of Marin.
Yes.
Yes.
And are there any other funds that, let's say, terrible things happen and we default or in danger of default and the lender feels insecure? Are there other funds other than those 2 revenue streams that a lender could come after to satisfy their insecurity or arrears?
Yeah, the membership fees that we charge our member organizations.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Anything else?
No. Well, TDA, STA,
yeah, state transit
funds, and farebox.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so LTF, STA.
Well, STA is part of the LTF.
Okay. And farebox and membership.
Yeah.
And then I saw in there, I think there are some security agreements, or they're going to require security agreements. Do they require any kind of debt reserves?
They do. That's correct. So when we set up the agreements for the collateral agent, we will also have a debt reserve fund, about 1 year's worth of debt service, which for the first 5 years, as you know, it's an interest only debt service. So it's going to be rather minimal. But as the debt service increases, that debt reserve fund does also increase as well. And
so I'm assuming that you all have a plan for funding the debt reserve when the time comes, because I think that the big payments are like $963,000 or something a year. So you all have a a way to fund that reserve as we need it?
Tony, maybe you can explain a little bit about how the funds are automatically directed into the Build America Bureau's agent. And so the agreements, Carrie, Director Dorman, are all in place for the county and MTC to take automatic action on that.
Right. I saw that's one of the agreements is irrevocable delivery instructions. But does that also cover any debt reserve we'd have to have? That's part of that irrevocable delivery.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And then, hold on. And so the debt service coverage at 10 times, LTF is 10 times our debt service coverage. And it looked pretty steady out into the future on what we'd be getting from LTF. Do you have any qualms about that? Or is there anything we need to be on the lookout for of that those funds could dry up?
No, I think it's the forecast for LTF revenues in the future is very reasonable. That forecast comes from the county of Napa when they do their analysis and report back to MTC. And it really does smooth out the revenues. That's why you see a very slow increase year over year. County tends to be very conservative in their estimates of LTF revenue generations for the county of Napa. So if there was a contraction, it won't directly too much affect our forecast because we've already taken into account kind of a slow growth LTF revenues for the foreseeable future. So, and you know, our LTF revenues are very resilient, and that's not something that can be diverted to state or other government agencies. It comes to NVTA, it comes to the county's trust account. Actually, we don't get it specifically necessitating the need for the irrevocable direction. With the county of Napa, they had agreed to the process as well as MTC. So, I am confident that the LTF revenues are going to be delivered of what we conservatively forecasted.
Thank you. And then I was looking at your timelines. Is there a possibility or probability of a situation where we award the contract before the TIFIA portion of our financing package closes?
Well, the TIFIA, it may not close until mid, the answer is yes. So we could execute a contract, and actually the TIFIA, the Build America Bureau wants to see an executed contract, or at least a contract with a name and a budget attached to it. So they're confident that the funding amount is reasonable, and or if the budget, the cost construction come back higher, then the Build America Bureau may offer additional funds for this project, and we'll have to assess whether that we can service a debt for those additional funds. And so the Build America Bureau is looking at us to at least select a contractor and potentially award a contract before the TIFIA loan closes.
So, and I guess this may be a question for our attorney. Any peril there that we award a contract and then something goes boom and we don't get the 19 or 20 million? Any legal issues there for us?
Yeah, so this is Deanne, and I also have Paul Chrisman on the line and Barney Allison, who's the special counsel associated with the funding. This tends to be a typical procedure and process, and Barney and Paul, please correct me if need to add to that. But given the funding schedule, that's one of those risks and one of the processes.
So what does that mean in layman's terms? I mean, is there a way to make this contract trigger subject to the funding, or does that not satisfy TIFIA? Build America.
Can I just add something to it? The contract itself has a 120 days period. Once we receive the bid and finalize the contractor, that price remains valid for 120 days. So that is our contract condition. Within that 120 days, if we don't have the funds, so we don't need to sign the contract if something falls apart within that. And but we have the decision to make that time frame. So that's
All right, Sanjay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate y'all's work on this. It's been a long time coming. Seems like a good deal. And thanks for answering my questions. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Dorman. Do I see any other questions from directors? I do not. Let's go over to the public. Kathy, do we have anyone in the public that wishes to address the board on this item?
We do not, Chair.
All right, and I'll bring it back to the board. I'll just say thank you to staff. Engaging banks and the federal government on a loan, those institutions would not give us any money unless they did their due diligence. And those are the checks and balances that we see. I think, as our council said, a lot of the timing, a lot of what we're seeing here is the standard, what I've seen at MTC. So I have a lot of confidence. We obviously want to avoid the outcomes that some of the council members raised. But I do believe we have a checks and balances. Our staff has vetted this deal and has structured it to protect, Napa County and the users of the system. So I'm very optimistic. And if the future holds where we have to recalibrate and pivot, we will. This is a strategic location located by high transit. And there's a lot of land value there. But I'll just say this, in terms of the legislation that is going to be impacting local governments, from reducing greenhouse gas emissions, from potentially parking ratio minimums being reduced, all that means is that we're going to have a more robust and resilient transportation system for the public. So I see our value only increasing over time. So this is an investment in the future for how we see mobility today, not necessarily how we see mobility tomorrow and into the future. So I'll leave it at that. Vice Chair Lesio.
I completely concur. Thank you so much, Chair Pedrosa, and to the NVTA staff and those who are helping our team here. This is taking a lot of vision and foresight. It's brave and bold, and I believe wholly it's the right thing to do for many, many reasons that has already been expressed. So with that, it would be my honor to move approval of this item.
Wonderful. And there's a lot of, perfect. And it's the requested actions, right, Vice Chair, that are listed in the staff report. There's 7. All right, that's the motion by Vice Chair Lesio. Did I hear a second from?
Second, Joseph.
Second by Joseph. All right, roll call vote, please.
Director Joseph,
Yes.
Director Garcia,
Yes.
Director Canning,
Yes.
Director Kraus,
Yes.
Director Licio,
Yes.
Director Sedgley,
Yes.
Director Pedrosa,
Yes.
Director Ramos,
Yes.
Director Doreen,
Yes.
Director Chateau,
Yes.
and Director Dorman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you, everyone. I look forward to the groundbreaking of this, Kate. All right, let's move on to item 3, Transit Operations Service Agreement number 21-12 with Transdev Service, found on page 371 to 490. Antonio, take it away.
Just 1 second. I'm going to do another screen share. All right, moving on. For item 9.3, it is staff's recommendation that the board approve resolution 21-19, authorizing the executive director to make minor modifications and execute agreement 21-12 with Transdev Services for transit services operations, pending Caltrans review and approval. The proposed award is a 5-year base contract from January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2026, and 2 1-year options, which can potentially extend it out to December 31st, 2028, in a total contract amount of $81,355,292. So we did this about 5 years ago. It was the last time the purchase transportation services contract came up for bid, and it was executed back in 2016. Currently, NVTA is actually in its option year of its current contract. NVTA was actually targeting a release date for the procurement in the spring of 2020, But after the stay-at-home order in March, those plans were shelved. As you know, transit was in a tailspin due to COVID, and NVTA was facing a fiscal cliff. We quickly went to an on-demand model for the local fixed route services while retaining the service hours for the commuter routes for the essential service workers who had to work in the lower part of the Bay Area. In fact, the transit agency budget incorporated a pandemic-induced deficit of $3 million over the next 2 fiscal years. Staff had to defer the RFP's release date to October 28th, 2020, while we try to make some sense of the agency's financial position and the amount of federal stimulus that NVTA may receive in its recovery. Fortunately, the federal stimulus has been able to offset all of the $3 million deficit and even provide some funding for recovery efforts. Most recently, MTC approved the first tranche allocation of the American Recovery Plan Act. I think that's what it's called, ARPA. And we'll talk about a little bit more about the agency's finances and 3-year outlook actually in greater detail at our August meeting coming up next month. So getting back to the request for proposals, the RFP was released in late October, and a mandatory pre-proposal virtual meeting was held in November. Bids were originally due at the end of February, but pushed back to March 31st to allow extra time for prospective operators to submit their bid, given their employees were working remotely. Bidders were given approximately 4 months to develop and submit a bid package. Although there were potentially 8 firms bidding, and the list is in the memo, NVT received 3 bids, which was the same number of bids that we actually received back in 2016. Some of the bidders were unable to get the necessary resources together to submit a quality bid for consideration. So, and of course, everybody was still working from home, and even trying to come to the current facility and to potentially see the new maintenance facility, those were quite difficult because of travel restrictions. So there were 6 individuals. So going to the selection of the bidder, so there were 6 individuals on the evaluation committee, which was composed of myself, Roxana, who's our senior financial analyst, Rebecca Shank, our manager of transit, and Libby Payan, our transportation planner. Additionally, we had on the committee the transit manager from Solano County, John Sanderson. And for the first time, we had participation from a member of the public. You may know Patricia Lynch, who also serves on our Citizens Advisory Committee. The executive director, Miller, was present at the interviews, but she did not score the bids. So each member of the panel could score a potential bidder up to 100 points in 3 categories: 40 points for background and experience, 30 points for qualifications and approach, and 10 points for creative and innovative approaches for maximizing service and efficiency. Each bid was also given a 10% bonus above and beyond their initial scores, which is actually an FTA requirement, but it's also a state requirement as well. Nonetheless, all 3 bidders committed to retaining the employees, the bus operators, and were thus given a 10-point bonus on top of their scores. So you may ask why price isn't considered a factor when we're scoring. And it's basically because price as a factor, a bidder can underbid the contract to get the maximum score. Then they may try to amend the contract when costs come in higher than the agreed upon contracted amount. We do look at cost competitiveness, meaning that we look at each bidder's cost to see how reasonable they are with each other, and if they're close together, then we know they're reasonable. For Transdev and Keolis, their costs came in for the services were similar and close to each other. So we knew they understood what NVTA's needs were in this new contract. RATP's price sheet was nearly $10 million more than the other 2, so they weren't considered cost competitive. And apparently they got something wrong or just didn't understand what our needs were. As you can see on the screen down below, you see the proposal's total score. Transdev coming in at 577. Keolis was a close second at 568, and our RTAP was a distant third. And because of that, our TAP did not move forward with the procurement. So we asked both Keolis and Transev to come back to us with what's called a best and final offer, an estimate based on, because the RFP had certain requirements that all bidders had to perform. The best and final offer was a second chance for both Keolis and Transev to sharpen their pencils and come back with a more refined cost for the services that we were asking for. In the memo, you saw NVTA staff also developed an internal cost estimate, which was about $77 million. And of course, Transev and Keolis came in a little bit higher than that. And it was really because staff underestimated sufficient staffing levels at the new facility, because the cost includes transition to the new mains facility. And we use cost escalation factors based on the Bay Area Consumer Price Index at the commencement of the RFP, which was around 2% at the time. And the profit was a little bit more anticipated. Costs were, because of NVTA's location that tends to be a little bit remote than the rest of the Bay Area, a lot of the employees have to be imported. They have to commute into the area, and we have to provide more like attractive compensation package. And because of that, the contract had increased costs for those factors, and that's why costs came in higher than NVTA's own internal estimate. But we did, after costs came in, we did take another look at the independent costs, our own estimate, and we did create a new independent cost estimate, and the estimate pegged the costs at around $82 million. So, with taking those factors into consideration and those cost escalations, both Keolis and Transev were reasonable. So based on the scoring, staff's recommendation is to authorize the executive director to make minor modifications and to enter into a contract with Transev Services pending Caltrans approval. That's important because Caltrans, as a funder of some of our federal funds, it's required that we get Caltrans approval for the draft agreement. So the draft agreement, the draft contract, which is also in the packet, is at Caltrans headquarters, and we're waiting for either them requesting additional information, asking for modifications, or sending us ideally an approval letter to go ahead and proceed with the execution of the contract. That being said, the contract's effective date is January 1st, 2022. So there's about 6 months left. And so we still have plenty of time to make adjustments and to ensure that all parties have reviewed the contract and provide feedback for the final agreement that all parties are able to sign off on. That being said, again, the contract amount for 5 years plus 2 one-year options is $81,355,292. And you may also ask to, where does these costs, where do they land in relation to other nearby transit operators? So we actually took a survey of small transit operators in the area, and our cost per hour of service will average around $48.18 over the life of the contract, over the 7-year life of the contract on average. Now, of course, it's going to start out in the 40s, and then every year it's going to increase about 3 to 4% until last year of the contract. But I had some nearby operators. They allowed me to take a survey of what their costs are in relation to ours. And as you can see here, we are still one of the most cost-effective transit operators in the Bay Area, at least, in the North Bay, in relation to the service hours, the cost per service hour that Transev will provide as compared to the other operators around. I put Yolo County Transportation District. I put a little asterisk there. That's a Davis. That's a bus that operates in Davis, but they do provide service down to Solano County. And they actually, I sent a request out to everybody I can think of, and these were the handful of operators who responded. So On average, the cost per hour of service in the North Bay runs around $45.70, and our costs are just a little bit of a bump from that. Just wanted to mention that no protests were filed for this procurement, but we did receive a Public Records Act request from Keolis asking for certain documents of the procurement process, which we will respond to once final negotiations have taken place, and also once the contract has been executed, because they did ask for the contract after NVTA executes it with Transdev Services. So just to circle back, staff's recommendation is for the board to authorize the executive director to enter into an agreement with Transdev, make minor modifications, and finally execute an agreement pending Caltrans approval and feedback from all the parties involved. With that, I can try and answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Antonio, for a very succinct presentation. And going forward, I really like tracking this cost per service, right? That's something that we've been spending a lot of time looking at, as we restore riders, looking at those operators that have been running transit very efficiently. So again, I think that's a good measurement. And just for perspective for some of my colleagues, granted, running a rail system is so different, but there's some operators where their cost of service is over $500 an hour, right? So just a good perspective to have. All right, at this point, if we can just go back to gallery view, Carrie or Kathy, just so it helps me identify who has their hands raised. All right, Council Member Doring and then Council Member Joseph.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question, maybe some clarification regarding the option years. As I read the staff report, there seemed to be a reference to the ability to negotiate those prices for the options for the 6th and 7th years. So that's one question. Then I wanted to direct maybe the attorney's attention or staff's attention to the contract under compensation, that page 388 of our agenda. And it talks about the compensation, but it also basically refers to the cost proposal, which also refers to the 6th and 7th years. And I want to make sure that we are not locking in those numbers unless they're to our benefit. So 2 questions. I just want to make sure that when we, in this contract under compensation section 8, we are not inadvertently saying that, yes, we agree to those year 6 and 7 costs that are in the proposal attached to the contract.
So I can answer the first part of that question. So the action before you is to approve the contract term for the entire 7 years, so 5 years plus 2 one-year options. When we do get into the option year, this is where it will require a contract amendment. And if, costs 6 and 7 years out, we're trying to, it's our best estimation, but there may be an ability to make amendments to change those costs because of the current environment, cost of living, et cetera, or other factors that may be involved. So it doesn't lock us into the entire 7 years. We're required by Caltrans and the federal government to negotiate the last 2 option years. If the terms don't change, then we just exercise the options. If the terms change, then we have to negotiate in good faith. And there may be a possibility that those last 2 years, those 2 years may change, but it'll most likely have to come back. Well, it will have to come back to the board because of the amount for another approval if we decide to exercise those options.
I appreciate that response. I would be more comfortable if we actually had some language in the contract that said it's subject to amendment. The language here is a little vague in terms of what our rights are with respect to the 6th and 7th years. And I'll just leave that to the attorney. A little bit more language in the contract would be helpful to say, yeah, we have a right. We're going to renegotiate that, amend the contract. Contracts obviously require both parties to assent to any amendment. So I just want to make sure we have that covered. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that, Antonio. Just some more clarifying language around that Councilman raised. Good point.
Absolutely. And right now we're waiting for Caltrans for their feedback, and we'll take the feedback here, and we'll incorporate those comments into the contract before we have final negotiations with Transdev.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Joseph.
Yes, I would agree with Board Member Doring's comment on in terms of the ability to amend, because if you look at the 7-year contract, Keolis is actually almost $1 million cheaper over the full 7 years. So, and they are showing a smaller percent increase each year. So looking at it from a financial point of view only, but for the first year, Keolis was actually a better deal over the other 6 years. I appreciate the fact that TransDev has some continuity and there's some intrinsic or intangible benefits to that. But looking at the numbers, Keolis ends up being cheaper if we go all 7 years. So I think it is important that we either negotiate years 6 and 7 or talk about a 5-year contract. Otherwise, we're actually spending more than.
So Director Joseph, if I just may respond to that. Tony already mentioned that it's very common for, especially a new contractor where we don't have an established relationship, to come back in those second years and negotiate in a way that wouldn't end up being competitive. Having that extra 2 years out there allows us to be able to negotiate without going through the process of going out to bid. And that really is the purpose of this. It's not to commit to necessarily those costs. They are going to be renegotiated no matter who we go with. But the process for getting to where we are right now was almost a year. So that is the huge benefit for us if we start early and talk to our contractor on those 2 years to make sure that they're in line with both budgetary and just a level of reasonableness. And if they aren't, then we will then go out again to bid. But for the purposes of staff sanity and just the whole process, this is a typical way of structuring this. And we will, as Tony pointed out, come back to this board with any changes, certainly any significant changes, we would call out and we would probably request your authority to just go out again for another bidding process at that time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Joseph. I don't see any other hands raised. Kathy, do we have any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item?
We do not, Chair.
All right, I'll bring it back to the board. If there's no further discussion, I will entertain a motion for approval with the direction provided by directors.
I'll move, Garcia.
We have first by Garcia.
Second by Alessio.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All right, we have first and a second. Roll call vote, please. Carrie, can we do the roll call vote?
Sorry about that. I muted myself.
Okay.
Director Garcia.
Yes.
Director Joseph.
Yes.
Director Canning.
Yes.
Director Kraus.
He had to leave. Then
He
step
said
up.
He's there.
He's muted.
Oh,
He's here until 3. Director Krause, you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you. For some reason, my little button here didn't work. But anyway, yes.
Director Alicio.
Yes.
Director Sedgley.
Yes.
Director Pedroza.
Yes.
Director Ramos.
Yes.
Director Doreen.
Yes.
Director Chateau.
She had to leave.
She's absent. Okay. And Director Dorman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to item 9.4, fiscal year salary ranges for Napa Valley Transportation Authority job classification. Found on page 491 to 501. Carrie, are you, who's taking this one here?
I am taking this, Chairman.
Okay. Antonio, go ahead.
All right. I promise this is the last item where you'll have to hear from me, but for this, staff is recommending the board approve resolution 21-22, approving the fiscal year 2021-2022 salary ranges for NVTA job classifications based upon a compensation study of comparable transportation agencies and Bay Area Consumer Price Index. So nearly 10 years ago, the board approved Resolution 1125, creating a salary classification study and establishing compensation ranges for NVTA job classifications based upon the agency's compensation and classification study. It's a mouthful. At the time, the agency was grappling with the fallout from the Great Recession, and Napa County had a lower cost of living than other Bay Area counties. Until 2014, NVTA relied on annual adjustments based on the Consumer Price Index to adjust salary levels. Then on February 19, 2014, at the February 19th meeting, the board approved a revision to Section 2 of NVTA's personnel policies, which established that pay grades were to be adjusted annually and indexed to the average of Napa County, Sonoma County, and Sonoma County Transportation Authority and Solano Transportation Authority increases given, or the Bay Area Consumer Price Index for all labor within Napa County, whichever is greater. So that put the impetus, the impetus of this action was for a number of reasons, but mostly due to the challenging environment of attracting job candidates for vacant positions. Just like many other government agencies looking to recruit top talent, NVTA has not been immune to the effects of the pandemic, exacerbated by the difficulty of having qualified individuals even submit a job application for an open position. The last salary range adjustment occurred on September 18, 2019 meeting with the board approval of Resolution 19-15, attachment number 2 in your packet, which adopted a salary increase of 2.4% for all job classifications based on the fiscal year 1920 index. Then came the pandemic. So in fiscal year 2021, there was no increased request brought to the board in light of the uncertainties of the economic impacts of the agency's revenues and disruptions occurring towards transit operations. For a time, we didn't even know how badly revenues would be effective, and so the agency initiated salary freezes, a hiring freeze, and several other cost containment measures. This meant that the last salary range adjustments occurred nearly 2 years ago. So with the assistance of federal stimulus and revenues coming in higher than expected, the financial picture of the agency has become more optimistic in the last few months. In fact, in the most recent round of federal stimulus, as I mentioned previously, it completely wiped out the $3 million pandemic-induced deficit for the prior year and in the current fiscal year. In August, staff will present to the board the adjustments of the current year's budget to have a full year's balanced budget. So although we were looking at our compensation structure in the fall of last year, the recruitment challenges compelled us to compare the responsibilities of the position with the commensurate salary that would be attractive to potential job candidates for open positions. We also looked at current responsibilities and organizational structure to ensure the agency's competitiveness in the current salary environment. As you all know, the agency back in 2011 is not the same, NVTA back in 2011 is not the same agency as it is today. So an analysis was conducted of potential agencies to be included in the NVTA's labor market using objective criteria and geographic proximity to NVTA, number of full-time equivalent employees, population, comparable agency budgets, cost of living, and other comparative services that NVTA delivers. And of course, we oversee the sales tax for Measure T. So as you can see in the attachment and on the screen, the ranges for updating the salaries varied very widely. This is because of the dual purpose nature of the agency as both the County Transportation Authority as well as a public transit services provider. There is just a lot of difficulty to try to fit the agency into a certain mold and compare it to similar governments in and around the Bay Area. We are also no longer just administrator of funds and funding, but we also are a tax authority. We expand mobility options, oversee expanded mobility options, and deliver some very large capital projects, of which you just approved one today. So try and find comparable salaries to fit the breadth of responsibilities for each position proved to be a little bit problematic. The results were somewhat expected, given that the last salary study was conducted in 2010, but it was also very revealing with just how out of step some of the agency's salaries were compared with the current job market and the current environment. The findings indicated that NVTA's salary ranges were consistently lower across all employee classifications. Given the cost of living is now more comparable with the larger Bay Area counties, and potential candidates will most likely have to commute into Napa for their job, the agency's proposed salary ranges incorporate those factors into the updated ranges. Lastly, I did want to emphasize that today's actions, if approved, updates the salary ranges to make them commensurate with today's competitive salary landscape and does not compel the agency to increase an individual's employee salary. We're just updating the ranges, not specific to any employee at the agency. Individual salaries are still assessed through the employee's performance evaluation process. That concludes my report, and I can answer any questions, or staff can answer any questions you may have at this time.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing so that there's some clarity to what we ended up doing. The we did not adopt the compensation study figures because in some cases they were extraordinary. So we put a cap of 20% as the maximum amount on the high range, and we increased the low range just by 2% across the board. The other thing we did is that we have a number of employees within a common compensation class, and the compensation study made them wobbly and inconsistent with each other. So we adjusted them to stay within the same framework and basically looked at an average of the classifications that we classed together to develop what the actual range would be. So I just wanted you to be clear about what we ended up doing on that far right-hand column.
Thank you very much, Kate. I see some questions from directors already. So Director Joseph and then Director Dorman.
Yes, thank you. Some technical questions on the salary survey. When you were looking at the different agencies and collecting their numbers, did you calculate the average or did you calculate it based on a median number?
Median.
Okay. The second point is I think the fiscal impact or no fiscal impact may be misleading. That I appreciate that no one's getting a direct raise as a result of what we're doing. But if somebody's at the high end of the range and then the high end goes up 20%, is the way we administer the program that says, okay, your salary is still the same until your evaluation date? Or do you get an adjustment because you're at that point on the range?
We will be providing adjustments based on performance evaluation, and we will not be adjusting any salaries based on the compensation study automatically. Okay. In other words, we're not going to put everybody in the automatic low range. Although if you take a look at it, that would be a nominal amount of money. It's not very much money. Right. There's no big, huge bump.
Yeah, it just would be helpful if we at least said speculatively, if everybody went from where they're at to, essentially rolled them over to where the new ranges are, what would that cost us so that we have a sense?
Yeah, we did that calculation, and my recollection was it was under $30,000 a year.
Okay. All right, and then the last one is more of a social commentary. It just seems as if the high end of the staffing are getting the largest increases and the low end of the staffing are getting not as high. So it just makes you wonder what's going on there. So
I think that we can, it's a cultural thing. It's the division of people who had the ability to go to college for one reason or another. And I acknowledge 100% what you're saying. And we will do our best to make sure that people at the lower end of the salary range are compensated for the hard work that they do within their ranges.
Because a lot of times it may be college, but it's also the mobility of certain classes, that it's not every day that you see an administrative technician leaving for a better, well, maybe you do. It's just the higher end positions tend to be able to negotiate better rates, and then that drives the market.
Right, and that's what's going on. It's the market. I also just want to point out that while we did not, we did put a cap on the amount of the range, the cost of living in Napa is as high as the cost of living almost everywhere else in the region now, short of maybe certain places in the peninsula and in San Francisco. So, that's another ongoing challenge. This is why we had, the person we hired to be the construction manager, Farhad Farazman, is an awesome individual with great talents, but we can't hire him full time because he's an annuitant, and so that is what we ended up with, and it's not ideal, but it's what we're having to move forward with. And this was not the first time that we had a marginal response to our listings. So.
And I am aware of that. There's been a few recruitments that have been challenging, and it is the nature of the beast. It's just not a pleasant nature, but it is what it is. Thank you. Thank you for your.
Thank you, Director Joseph. Director Dorman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. We in Yountville just went through a similar analysis for a position we were recruiting for, and I'm interested in who was in the survey, because right now, I think our policy is we're looking at Napa County, Sonoma Transportation, Solano Transportation, and there were 16 in the survey, excuse me. And what we found was there were some outliers in the survey that we made, and it was much more local than the 16 that we've done here. Did you make any accounting for that? Did you throw out any outliers, high and low?
Well, that's why we selected the median and also capping. That's how we adjusted for it. There was, and then also, I don't want to call out individual employees because this is not a reflection on the work they do, but the transit manager position was particularly challenging because there are general managers and we didn't use BART as one of our agencies, that make over $500,000 a year. Then there are associate kind of senior planners that do the management of a transit system within a city, and those were particularly low. So we had some challenges, and so the transit manager position basically was just indexed to the project engineer manager position because those two were side by side, and we couldn't really come up with a reasonable way to adjust the transit manager position based on the results of the study. So in short, the answer to your question is yes, we did do that.
Okay, thank you. And then I think you touched on this, but the words in the staff report were maintain parity between existing comparable salary ranges. Could you, sorry, I didn't quite get your explanation. Could you just, thank you.
And just as in the example I just used, is that we currently have a manager level position, and regardless of what their role is, they're the same. So the transit manager and the project engineer manager is the same salary. So that's why we index them to each other. The same thing with administrative support. We index those positions to each other as well.
Okay, oh, perfect. I see it on the chart now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Council Member. And now I see Director Sedgley.
Thank you. Yeah, these are difficult times. The city of Napa, we're like Yountville, like everybody, we're going through contract negotiations and retention issues with some key employees. I don't know that anybody has the answers. We try to keep it simple. Look at the Bay Area cost of living increases, 3.5, maybe bumping up closer to 4. But just to keep it simple, we just have to look at, cost of living across the board, 3.5%, and that's the way I would propose any kind of salary adjustments in this organization at this time. Is we just got to look at the budget and have that, from the bottom of the top, everybody gets a 1 year cost of living. If you want to do it at 1 year, or you roll them in a similar, kind of review at the year, but some of these just on, I know it's a cap, but wow, that's a big cap.
Well, and just to your point, we froze salaries at the beginning of the pandemic, and the only increases that we have given staff since when we started getting the stimulus monies, as you call it, transit is getting pretty good money for around that. And also we rely heavily on sales tax, which, as you know, has bounced back. We have been pretty conservative about what we actually passed out. This, again, was very much driven by trying to fill positions that were open. And given where we are right now with moving these enormous capital projects, the more talent that we can draw here, the more comfort I'm going to have. And I'm sure the more comfort the board will have.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Sedgley, for that. And Kate, I don't see any further. You know what? I do see Director Doran. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a brief question. Maybe I missed the nuance in this when the presentation was made, but are these numbers reflecting both the salaries and the benefits? And that's important to me, but are the benefits, are we able to separate out the benefit packages and then do a comparison, a similar comparison to see how we're doing in terms of our benefit packages, so that we can get a sense of, we may be a little low on salary, a little high on benefits, or vice versa, just to get a feel for that part of it.
Yeah. So this does not include our benefits. And I would just say that our benefits are not at par with other agencies because the former executive director reduced the amount of potential CalPERS pension benefits before he retired, or I think it went into effect after he retired, but he was grandfathered in. So generally speaking, most of the CalPERS pensioners that come in that are grandfathered in are getting much higher pensions than we are. We have like the lowest amount that I think CalPERS offers for existing CalPERS employees. So for instance, I was at 2.77 at 50 at AC Transit and 2.5 at 55 at MTC. We're now at 2% at 62 here.
And healthcare and other benefits?
They're about the same.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, Director Doran. I don't see any other directors at this time. Kathy, do we have any members of the public?
We do not, Chair.
All right, I'll just bring it back to the board. And Kate, what I'll say is, look, I see the problem we're trying to solve is those recruitments have gotten a little bit more difficult. So, I support the direction we're heading in, and I do appreciate that any raises are still based off merit, which you have shared, and we will be discussing those as those come up. So supportive of this action item. So I will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved. Ramos.
All right, we have first by Supervisor Ramos.
Second, Garcia.
Second, Garcia, American Canyon. All right, we have first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Director Garcia.
Yes.
Director Joseph.
Yes.
Director Canning.
Yes.
Kraus is absent. Director Alicio.
Yes.
Director Sedgley.
No.
Director Pedroza.
Yes.
Director Ramos.
Yes.
Director Doreen.
Yes.
Director Chateau. Oh, she left. I'm sorry. And Director Dorman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you all. Let's move on to our last item, federal 9.5 federal and state legislative update. Kate, take it away.
Great. I'm going to make this very short. You all know that the budget drama at the state level carries on. There are two major pieces of legislation that have been approved and the governor signed on June 28th, AB 128 and SB 129, which made a number of changes. The revised budget includes an expansion of Medi-Cal coverage for undocumented immigrants age 50 plus, repayment of $11 billion for K through 14 education funding, 200 childcare slots for low-income households, and $6 billion to expand access to broadband over multiple years. SB 129 also includes $1.2 billion in legislature requests ranging from affordable housing to libraries to fire prevention and transportation. 1.2 billion line item request is approximately $47 million, includes approximately $47 million to the Bay Area. And 41 million is provided for housing and homelessness projects. Included in the 47 million is $3 million for the design of the State Route 37 interim project, and 7.6 million for the County of Napa for fuel reduction, suppression, and critical drinking water supply and wildfire safety improvements. There are also continued negotiations associated with the high-speed rail funding, which may result in an additional, for a lack of better words, I'm going to call it earmarking for transportation projects, including the potential for some active transportation funding for Napa. So we'll keep you posted on that. We don't have the details quite yet. On the federal side, I'll just say that the House and the Senate are actually pretty close on reauthorization. House approved its bill, which is a $547 billion bill, $242 billion over the existing FAST Act transportation authorization. We anticipate that we will be able to have something hopefully before the FAST Act expires. So we'll keep you posted on that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Kate, for that. Any questions from directors at this time? I don't see any hands. Any members of the public wish to comment on this item? Seeing none. All right, we're going to move on. That was just an informational item. Any future agenda items for the board? Seeing none. Mayor Garcia, I apologize.
Yeah, so we're just wondering the impact on transit with COVID, and we're already opening up. When can we expect to see a report on how our transit system is working, number of riders, et cetera?
Right, so we can include that in our financial update to you, which is going to move in August already, and provide additional information about transit.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor Garcia. Seeing no further final thoughts or words of wisdom, we're going to adjourn to our next meeting, which will be a special meeting for August 18th. With that said, thank you all for participating, and to members of the public for joining us. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Bye all. Thanks.
Bye.